Hey guys, this is Lisa. This is an amazing episode, but I do need to warn you there is explicit language in it. So if you've got kids around, you may just want to be careful. Other than that, enjoy.
Hey you guys, welcome to the Sheroic podcast. I'm Cassey.
And I'm Lisa.
And we have a very special guest today.
The Mel Robbins. Okay, so let's get started. So you were a former criminal defense attorney, which I didn't have any clue over. Like, if people see you now and like the energy, that's, I think, the last thing people would actually go to, which is very surprising.
Thank gosh.
You suffered from panic attacks at the age of 19 and took anxiety medication for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. You also suffered from postpartum depression after the birth of your first child. You're an on-air commentator for CNN. Your TED Talk, How to Stop Screwing Yourself Over, is one of the most viewed TED Talks of all time with over 10 million views, which is insane. You've appeared on Oprah and the Today Show. You're an author of the smash hit 5 Second Rule, which is now the most successful self-published audiobook of all time. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Incredible.
And we're so talking about that today.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, last but not least, you were a guest on Impact Theory.
Yes.
And your Facebook clip has gone viral and has now over 30 million views.
It's true.
Ooh, where do you want to start?
Where do you want to start?
I think we start with anxiety.
Great.
Our audience has really asked us many questions about anxiety, about depression. It's such a prominent thing in young girls these days.
Yes.
And you having gone through it, and you're very eloquent about how all the steps that you have taken to overcome that. So if you're ready, let's dive in.
I am. Well, first of all, I think it's so important that we talk about it. Because when you suffer from anxiety, which is, in my opinion, perfectly normal, you can have anxiety that's triggered by certain situations. You can have anxiety that's triggered by setbacks in your life, or you can have anxiety that is part of your genetic makeup. And I won the genetic lottery and happen to have the part that is part of my genetic makeup. And one of the reasons why I know this is having had 3 kids. My husband and I have an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 12-year-old. We have 2 that, for sure, born with anxiety. Like, you can just see that it's part of the default wiring in, their minds. And so, first things first, I think it's really important for everybody to talk about anxiety, and also to understand that for me, and for lots of experts and doctors out there, we look at it as a physical wiring issue in your body, just like diabetes. Mm-hmm. And so if somebody has diabetes, you may not like it, but you don't feel shame for the fact that you take insulin to correct a physical issue that you were born with. I would love to see the world start to see anxiety as the same way, that there is absolutely no shame, there's no deficiency in you. You have a physical wiring issue that has you set to get really nervous and to have body sensations that escalate the normal nervousness. So that's the first thing. But yeah, no, it really came to a head when I was 19 years old. I had always been kind of a high-strung, very active thinker, active worrier. You know, the kind of kid that was homesick at camp, the kind of kid that wrung her hands before every tennis meet, the kind of kid that, even though I got fantastic grades, I was convinced ahead of time that I was going to fail. And it spiraled out of control when I was 19 and started to become panic attacks.
Did something specifically happen where that turned into panic attacks? Or
it's a great question, Lisa. I think that I was going through a lot of change. Okay. So I was off at college. I'd never put this together. Actually, my boyfriend's parents at the time, so I was at Dartmouth College as a sophomore, and my boyfriend's parents at the time were going through a divorce, and his father committed suicide.
Oh my gosh.
Devastating. Absolutely devastating. And it was then that it went from kind of this baseline nerves and anxiety and, worry kind of ticked up into a full-blown panic attack situation. And if you've never had a panic attack, like the best way to explain it, so that we all kind of have the same definition moving forward, is that worrying is something we all do, right? And worrying is having negative thoughts up here. Anxiety is the big sister to worrying. Because what anxiety is when you have worries. So maybe you're worried about a conversation you're going to have with your boss, or maybe you're worried about a text that you got from a friend and you think that she's mad at you, or maybe you're worried about getting on an airplane. And what happens when you have the little sister worry go into the big sister anxiety is that your body sensations start to match the worries in your head.
So how would you describe the body sensations?
So you might start sweating.
Okay.
Your heart might start to race. You might get a pit in your stomach. You might get sweaty under your armpits. You might get tight in your throat. It's that kind of pre-performance anxiety that a lot of us feel.
Got it.
So that is like anxiety. Anxiety is the stage when the body is now getting agitated, not just the thoughts. A panic attack is like the mother of worrying. Because what happens in a panic attack is that your mind might be worrying, right? Your body might be starting to get agitated, but then your mind hijacks the situation and turns it into danger. And so I'm going to give you a really specific example that I think we can all relate to. So have you ever had an experience where you're driving a car or you're in a car and all of a sudden another car cuts you off?
Right.
And and you have that, oh my God, we almost just died.
Yeah.
And your heart, like what happens in your body?
Yeah. It races and it beats like
you stop for a
trillion
second
times
and can't
harder.
breathe almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is your mind saying?
I can't believe I'm still alive.
Yeah. And holy cow,
Right.
we almost got hit by a car.
Right.
But as soon as the car is gone, your mind recognizes there's no danger. So because mentally you've got an explanation for why your heart just raced and why you just went, your mind doesn't think that there's a problem because the car's gone away.
So there's a correlation between your mind and your body.
Bingo. When you have a panic attack, there's no correlation. You're standing in your kitchen or you're about to walk into the yoga studio.
Yeah.
You just hung up with your friend. Nothing's wrong. And all of a sudden you get that heart racing, throat this, race through your body, and your mind looks around and goes, oh shit, what's going on? Wait, we're at the yoga studio. Why is her heart racing? And it's a primal reaction by your brain. Your brain swells with cortisol, like immediately.
Yeah.
And it starts looking for an explanation to explain why the body is now freaking out. And without an explanation, your mind's job is now to get you out of that situation. So most people that have a panic attack start to think they're dying. They get really scared. They start pacing, and they try to leave the room. That's what happens for most.
Because there's no explanation.
Correct. So your brain takes you on autopilot to get you away from the situation you're in. And so what happens for a lot of people that have never had panic or anxiety attacks before is that it's really so upsetting because you think you're having a heart attack or you think that there's something terribly wrong and yet you don't know what it is, that the fear that it's going to come back actually triggers it again.
Wow.
So I would be walking across campus and nothing is wrong and it's a beautiful day, at Dartmouth College, and I would have that rush and I would be terrified because all of a sudden I wouldn't know why this was happening to me. And so luckily when I was 21, I just suffered through it. And
You weren't diagnosed at all?
I didn't really. I talked to somebody about it, but I was scared to death of drugs. And this is so screwed up. But the other reason why I convinced myself I shouldn't take drugs is I was afraid it would change me. I was afraid I wouldn't be myself, which is such a weird reason. Because if you think about it, anxiety was robbing me of being me.
Right.
So I already wasn't myself.
Right.
And so I finally met this great psychologist or psychiatrist when I was in law school, and we had a 6-month debate about drugs.
Whether you should take them or not?
Oh, he was convinced. He's like, your textbooks, we did all this blood work. He showed me the blood work. I argued. I was a great lawyer. I argued. And then finally I took it. And it was really interesting. When the drugs that are out there, and, we live in an awesome moment in time when there's a lot of options for people. When you get the right solution for you, it's literally like what happened with Zoloft is it was like there was a volume that was jacked all the way to 10, and the Zoloft turned it off. And so all those constant thoughts that were barraging me all day long, the worries, the not being good enough, the fact that I would default to thinking about something was going to be wrong, it just turned it off, and it allowed me to start to learn new habits and to cope. And I took those drugs religiously for 2 decades.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then why did you stop?
Well, what happened is, and we'll get into the 5-second rule, but I had invented the 5-second rule as a way to break a habit of hitting the snooze alarm. And then I started to utilize it to discover the power of making 5-second decisions. And as my life started to change, because I was grabbing control of my thoughts and actions in these 5-second windows, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, people, my life changed because I was changing. I had discovered this incredible self-monitoring tool. And as I shared it with the world, which is why that TED Talk has taken off, and people started to write to me about it, and they were writing to me about anxiety and writing to me about addiction and writing to me about how they were using this simple little rule that I created, I started to feel like I should really experiment with whether or not I could cure myself of anxiety because I had changed all these physical habits. I had become courageous about business. I had become disciplined about exercise. I had become disciplined about my drinking. I had become a very different kind of parent and wife. And I started to wonder, could you use a simple tool like the 5-second rule to not only change your physical habits and your defaults in terms of your behaviors, but could you actually change the default settings in your mind? And the answer is yes, you can. And the other reason why I came off the meds is at that point in time, we were going through a situation with our now 17-year-old where she was going through a ton of anxiety, suddenly went from this bubbly kid to not wanting to sleep in her bedroom, not wanting to go to overnights, tons of fear. And she was not, I felt uncomfortable giving her meds. And I thought, well, if I'm uncomfortable giving her meds and I'm expecting her to use these strategies in CBT therapy, I should do the walk too.
Right.
Can you just explain what CBT therapy is?
Yeah, it's
for that
cognitive
people may
behavior
not know
therapy, which is all about kind of recognizing the triggers, whether it's people or places or a time of day. Like a friend of mine called me the other day. She's going through a divorce, and she said it's that 5 o'clock hour where I get really anxious.
Oh, wow.
And I said to her, I know why it is, but do you? And she said, I don't know. And I said, it's because your husband's coming home.
Oh.
And so classic CBT therapy helps you identify those moments and those situations where it triggers you to go into the habit of anxiety. And this is another thing that I've learned in studying the 5-second rule and studying why all these metacognition tools work. And that is that none of us are anxious. We have a habit of feeling anxious. None of us are worriers. We actually have a habit of worrying. None of us are actually born procrastinators. We develop a habit of doing it. And what's super cool about kind of taking behavior that you self-loathe and hate about yourself and putting it in the chunk of a habit is it makes it something objective that you can go to work on versus part of your identity.
Right.
Yeah, didn't you say like it's not a personality trait and that people think it is?
Yes. Yeah, and so
that.
like I for years said I have anxiety. And the truth is I had a habit of being anxious. And it's a very different way to think about it. Because it's not about changing you. It's about changing some pattern that you have. And, obviously, that especially in the work that you do in fitness, that's exactly what you're doing. You're teaching people new behaviors that have a profound impact on how you think and how you feel. And so I started literally going to war against and I go like this because I like to take concepts from the talk into the physical.
Okay.
And so, if you think about your brain, you've got the prefrontal cortex, which is in women, our prefrontal cortex in brain scans, Dr. Amen, one of the most recognized neuroscientists around, is just about to release this huge study where he looked at 40,000 brain scans of men and women. And women have a much larger prefrontal cortex than men do. That's where all strategic thinking, that's where behavior modification, that's where focus comes from, decision making. This explains, by the way, why there's 14 times more men in jail than women. Our decision-making capabilities as women are so much more profound because we have a much larger prefrontal cortex, so we are able to self-monitor. And what's weird is that as a gender, we get tagged as the more emotional one.
Yeah.
When the truth is, we're not.
Right. And then there's so much more, quote unquote, decision makers in business than women are when we're less in jail.
Yes.
How interesting.
Yes, it's really fascinating.
Oh my gosh.
And so what I like, worrying is a habit. And so when you're focused on something, you really aren't worrying. But the second your thoughts drift, they drift to this interior part of your mind. And this is where all your habit loops get encoded and where the patterns of worrying, the patterns of beating yourself up, the patterns of anxiety, they get encoded right here. So when you're not paying attention, you'll drift onto autopilot and be in a different part of your brain. And so I started to use the 5-second rule and the count backwards to yourself, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique to manually switch which part of the brain I was using and to interrupt the patterns of worrying.
Okay, so explain the 5-second rule for people who don't get it. Is it literally just you saying, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go?
Yeah, like,
Okay.
well, first of all, don't count out loud because it'll freak people out around you.
You know, sometimes I will because, okay, I had this weird mental block of jumping on top of a box for my HIIT workout.
Oh, yeah.
And I had been graduating up to different levels of boxes, and there was just one that was like up to my mid-thigh, and I was like, I don't want to scrape up my shin. And I literally was at 24-Hour Fitness in front of this box for 35 minutes. And this guy was watching me. He was there the whole time. He's like, just do it. And then I was like, okay, 3, 2, 1. I would go up to it and I would stop, and it just like kept happening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, the thing about counting backwards is it requires focus. So you don't do it in your day-to-day life. So you can use this simple mind trick as a way to hack your brain and grab everything that's going on here and create a laser focus on the place you want to go.
Okay.
And so here's the 5-second rule.
You give us a breakdown
Yeah.
how you discovered this.
Well, so the story is I was probably at the worst moment in my life, 2008, really tough year for a lot of people. And, you know, I just want to say that it wasn't as bad as it can get because I wasn't facing a life-threatening illness and I hadn't had anybody in my life die. But when you're facing problems in your own life, they can feel completely insurmountable. And at the moment, I was unemployed, and my husband's restaurant business was going under, and we had 3 kids, and we were about to lose it all. The marriage, the house, all of our savings, everything. And I couldn't get out of bed. And
Literally couldn't get out of it.
yeah, like the alarm would go off, and we've all had those mornings where you wake up, and the first thing that fills your mind after a night of tossing and turning is dread. And all of the things that are wrong in your life, and your head starts to spin, and you start to get filled with this sort of heavy blanket of doubt. And I would reach over and hit the snooze alarm. I mean, I was unemployed. I felt like my problems were so big, like how the hell am I going to get us out of this situation? I didn't even know how to begin. I didn't feel confident. I didn't feel motivated. I didn't feel any of the assuredness that we all need in those moments. I just felt a tremendous amount of fear and this deep sense of failure. Now, one of the things that's interesting about being in a deep personal breakdown is that you do intellectually know the small things you could be doing. You know, like you could be eating right, you could go sober, you could exercise every day, you could reach out to a friend, but it gets so much more tempting to isolate yourself, and that's what most of us do. And so I was trapped also in this kind of mental battle with myself because there was so much self-loathing and fear, and yet there was this knowledge that I could change, and I was constantly arguing with myself, saying, well, how the fuck is going for a walk going to change the situation? How is being nice to Chris going to change the fact that we have lost our entire savings in the kids' college funds? How is cold calling and trying to find a job? Who is going to hire me? Like, you argue against yourself. And so I was really stuck. And the other thing is I wanted to change. I mean, I just was convinced that there was nothing I could do. And so one night I was watching television and I noticed this commercial, and there was a rocket ship launching at the end. And I thought, oh my God, that's the answer. Tomorrow morning, when that alarm clock goes off, I'm going to launch my ass out of bed like NASA. I'm going to move so fast that my mind can't talk me out of it. And that's the key insight. Because one of the things that you're about to discover is your whole life is going by in 5-second decisions.
True.
Do you say something or not?
Mm-hmm.
Do you jump onto that box or do you stop yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Do you shrink? You know, are you like, do you shrink and stay quiet, or do you expand and act with courage? And that in any 5-second moment, you can change anything that you're thinking about, and you can change any behavior. And that changes everything. And so the very next morning, the alarm went off, and immediately it was like, have you ever had one of those moments where it feels like time is happening in slow motion?
Yeah.
So I woke up, I'll never forget, it was a Tuesday in February. It was winter in Boston. It was freezing. Chris was sleeping on the couch. The alarm goes off, and I immediately felt that dread that I'd been feeling for months. And I could feel almost like a dark cloud coming in, you know, and this probably all transpired in 5 seconds, but I could just feel my mind winding up to talk me out of, like, getting up. And I went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's like it pushed that dark cloud away, and I stood up. Yeah, and I was like, "What the fuck just happened?" It's like the strangest thing. And then I went on my day, and then the next morning I used it again, and the next morning I used it again, and then I made myself a simple promise: if I found myself today hesitating when I knew I should do something, I would count backwards 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I would move forward no matter what. And so I would walk out into the kitchen, for example, and Chris would be there, and I literally would, the feelings would flood my body like I wanted to kill him, because it was easier to blame him for the financial issues that we were in. I mean, I was unemployed. It wasn't like I was creating anything for us.
Right.
And I'd go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it was like pushing the feelings down and giving me a moment to get control. And what was actually happening is I was turning off the patterns here and awakening the part of the brain that I needed to self-monitor.
So after the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, what did you do to keep going? Did you tell him, Chris, I love you?
No,
or
I just didn't snap.
Okay, so you just didn't snap.
Yes.
Got it.
Or, you know, you go for the coffee and you say you're not going to put the cream in it. And you start reaching for the cream in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you literally get the almond milk or the coconut oil or whatever it is that you said you were going to do. I would see my trainers by the door, and I would look outside and see that it's raining, and I would start to go, but it's raining, and I'd go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'd put my shoes on. And so slowly but surely, my whole life started to change because I was changing one 5-second decision at a time. Instead of letting self-doubt or fear or procrastination or anxiety make my decisions, I was pushing that dark cloud away and focusing on the things I needed to do to slowly climb out of the mess we were in. And that meant being nicer to my husband and more supportive. It meant cold calling and finding a job. And by the way, that's how I got an audition for a radio show. And that landed me a gig on Sunday nights doing radio, which landed me a syndicated radio show, which then got the attention of CNN. Like, it created this little snowball. It got me to curb my drinking because I was coming home every night and having 4 Manhattans because it was much easier to zone out and drunk out than to actually be present to everything. You know, you'd go to reach for the alcohol, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, grab the seltzer.
So it's a
Same thing with
moment of like
exercise.
breaking your triggers and your habits that you were
100%.
talking about earlier.
100%. This is in the language of habit researchers. I had mistakenly created the most powerful starting ritual on the planet. And that's why people around the world, and I never intended to share this with anybody because it sounds so stupid. Oh, just count backwards, you'll change your life. And I also didn't know why it worked. And so when I was asked to give that TEDx talk that's now gone crazy viral, it was really about how I had gone from being an attorney to getting into the startup business to being a coach to then getting into the media, And it was the first speech I'd ever given. So I was having a panic attack
Wow,
as
that
I
was
was
your
giving
first
it.
speech?
Yes,
Wow.
when I watch that TEDx talk now, I don't even remember being there. I was in such an acute state of adrenaline, and I let it slip at the end. And that created this massive speaking business and this kind of incredible tool that is changing lives around the world. And it also, when we started hearing from people who started using the countdown technique, oh my gosh, I've lost 110 pounds because dieting is 5-second decisions. And I've run my first marathon because training for one is 5-second decisions to start. It's all about starting.
It is all about starting.
Yes. So Nike's tagline could have been, do it. That would not be very empowering because that's like annoying. But just do it is an acknowledgement of our humanity. You see, right before you're about to jump in the game, right before you're about to start exercise class, there's a moment where you stop and hesitate. And so Nike's tagline recognizes what we all do, which is right before we're about to start, we stop and we think. And so Nike's tagline is, hey, I know you feel tired. Just do it. Hey, I know you're doubting yourself. Just do it. Like they're coaxing you. And just do it as a coaching piece of advice doesn't work for us because it's a concept that we think about. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is a tool because when you count, you're already taking action. So you are 5 steps in toward the thing you're doing. It's how you start.
And you have an incredible theory about why it's counting down versus counting up.
Well, counting up, you can keep going.
Right.
Unless you go into negatives, you can be
That's
0,
true.
-1, -2.
But it never occurred to me that would make such a dramatic difference.
Because you are considering when versus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's been socialized into us that's the boost. And here's the other thing. Now that I introduced it as a behavior modification tool, I realize and have now learned with the outpouring of people coming in that they use this in public schools like crazy. If you have an assembly of elementary school students, you'll often see a principal go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you'll see an entire room of hundreds of kids get quiet.
That's
because it requires
interesting.
you, it actually focuses you down to the 1.
Interesting.
Same thing with special forces. When they're about to do any kind of new training skill, they count backwards to launch the team and the squad because, again, it rallies everybody down to that point. And so there are lots of other examples where it's being used as a focus tool.
Wow. So one of the biggest questions I get in fitness is, how do I get motivated? I can't get up off the couch. I can't do this. Like, what would you suggest to someone like that?
Stop waiting to feel like it. I mean, there are people who love exercise. Hello. There are people who fucking hate it right here. And I have been an athlete my whole life. I played tennis and ran track in high school. I rode crew and played rugby at Dartmouth. I have run several marathons. I go to Soul Cycle all the time. I do yoga. I don't break a sweat unless somebody is screaming at me. And so I had a huge breakthrough in my own health when I finally realized, now I'm almost 50, so it took me almost 45 years to figure this out. I don't want anybody to make the mistake I did and suffer. There is nothing wrong with you if you hate exercising. And you may never like it. And that's okay. But stop fucking waiting to feel like it. I put exercise in the same category as unloading the dishwasher, doing the laundry, picking up dog poop, making my bed. I hate doing all 4 of those things. I still do it. Now, if I'm unloading the dishwasher, though, I don't stand there and whine about it. I just suck it up and I do it. And I know that even though I don't want to do it, I have to do it. The same thing is true with exercise. The second I made the mental shift and stopped punishing myself for the fact that I am not the kind of person that loves to exercise and loves to go and, loves to start and loves to sweat, it transformed everything because I took away all my mental resistance and BS. I mean, there's just some of us that are hardwired to not like exercise, and that's okay.
But you like how it makes you feel, right? I'm guessing that's why you keep doing it?
There's a bunch of reasons why I do it. I understand the brain science around how when you exercise, it increases productivity. It helps stimulate growth in terms of the base of the brain. There's just, there's so much research. If you're interested, read the book called Spark by Dr. John Rady about how it creates miracle grow for your brain. I do like how I feel at the end of it.
Right.
I do. But I have stopped expecting to ever find joy in getting there. And that has made all the difference in the world. There's also a little hack that I created that has helped a lot.
Okay, share the hack.
Sure. So using science for you exercise haters, but whether it's vain or you should, this is what you do. So if you research habits have three parts. There's a trigger, there's the behavior, and there's a reward. And when you take those three things together, they become one chunk that get encoded right here. And I can give you an example. I'm going to say a word, and I want you both to say the first word that comes to mind.
Okay, I'm going to close my eyes.
Okay.
'cause that'll be more-
Okay. Peanut butter.
Jelly.
I hesitated. I was thinking about a lot of different things, like plastic container.
Well, peanut butter jelly is usually the one that everybody shouts out. But
Plastic
I was just thinking about the thing that it comes
That's your
in.
screw lid,
And
yes.
then, see, I hesitated. I was like, that's kind of weird, so I'm not going to say it.
But
and
you
then
should have
there
just
we go.
said it out loud. Just say it.
Plastic container.
There you go.
That's yours. For most people, it's jelly. And what happens is when you associate two things together as a pair, it gets encoded as one chunk of information. This, by the way, is why bias, whether it's racial or gender, is so hardwired, because once you have information paired together, that women aren't as smart or they're not as good leaders or whatever it may be, it gets encoded as one chunk. And so you have to, this is why getting rid of bias is so difficult, because cognitively, when people make associations, white people are this way, black people are this way, Asians are this way, then it gets encoded together. And so in order to, because remember how automatic it was, whether it's container or jelly, we've got to then intellectually break that association apart. The same is true with your habits. So it's...
That's so incredible. Sorry, you've just totally blown my mind right now.
So habits all begin with a trigger. Okay, so a habit is anything you do without thinking. And it's not just biting your nails. Another example of a habit that I like to use is visualize putting on a pair of jeans right now.
Okay.
Do you put in your right or your left leg?
Right first.
I'm not sure. It changes.
Right, but see, you don't think about when you do it.
No, I don't.
That's
No,
a
I
habit.
don't think about it.
The trigger is you see the jeans, and then your mind goes into autopilot
Yeah.
because it's done the routine so many times. How you tie your shoelaces, whether you put the loop over or under or whatever,
Yeah.
that's a habit.
Right.
So these are all codes. These are chunks of behavior patterns that get encoded as a chunk and put right here, and they're triggered by certain things. Smoking is an excellent example, and eating. So people that have trouble with, if you're the kind of person that's an emotional eater.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because we have a lot of people who are listening who have eating disorders, have dealt with emotional eating.
Sure. So what happens if you have an issue where your eating is out of control is that there are things that are happening throughout your day that trigger you to eat. It might be the fact that it's morning. It might be the fact that your boss causes you stress. It might be looking at social media, and that, triggers you to feel FOMO, which has you eat. And so what's happened is all these things trigger you to default to grab something, okay?
Okay.
So start by identifying what are the things that trigger you. Then what we need to do is you look at the pattern of behavior. And in the case of eating, it's that you grab food. The only way to change this is to replace the pattern that you repeat. You see, you're never going to get rid of your triggers in life.
Okay.
Ever. Ever, ever, ever. There will always be people that annoy you. There will always be moments in your life that make you feel worthless. There will always be stress. So too often as a emotional eater or somebody that has anxiety or a smoking issue or whatever it may be, we go to work trying to not feel worthless or try to control the stress so that we get rid of the triggers. The more powerful way, backed by science, is to look at the behavior and to change the pattern. And the way that you do that is you understand what's the reward that you're getting. So I'm going to give you an example.
Okay.
So with the case of exercise, never feel motivated, but I want to do it. And I spent way too many years trying to fix feeling motivated. And when I finally realized, wait a minute, if I just force myself to do it and I create a great reward with it, that will encode this chunk that'll make me do it. So I always lay out my exercise clothes the night before. Because when I walk in the morning, I am triggered by the fact that they're lying on the floor.
Got it.
If I don't have a work meeting, I put them on. And I'll eventually exercise. And the reward that I always give myself is an iced latte or a smoothie. Now, I know for some people that's counterintuitive because it's food, but that's what I always give myself. And so for 4 days in a row, it literally only takes 2 to 3, 4 days. Create a trigger, something visual. For me, it's laying the clothes on the floor. Then do the pattern, force yourself to do it, which for me was exercise, and then give yourself the same reward, and something interesting happens. That clothing, exercise, iced latte becomes one chunk like peanut butter and jelly. And what happens when you see what happens in literally less than 4 days is when you see the clothing on the floor, instead of thinking about the torture of exercise, you think about the iced latte.
Oh.
Your brain jumps all the stuff in the middle. It is amazing. So I still don't like exercising, but the second I put on my exercise clothes, it is so weird. I'll be driving to a spin class, dreading the next 45 minutes, but I'm thinking about the iced latte because I've tricked my brain. And so with the food, what you need to do is figure out something that you can grab instead of food, whether it is a podcast you're going to listen to, or you're going to journal, or you're going to read from your favorite book, or you're going to text a friend that, like, there's some pattern, and then attach a reward to it. The reward might be, I know, there was a great one with smoking where this woman figured out her triggers, and she would smoke, I think, like 4 times a day. And what she did is she got out like $101 bills. Okay. And she had them in a drawer, and when she would walk out, because people that smoke, it's like, I have my breakfast smoke, and then I have my smoke as I'm on the phone, and then I have my smoke as I'm like sitting at lunch, and then I have my smoke when I'm driving my car. And so all these triggers. So she had her hundreds, and she had a photo album. And so every time, hey, it's breakfast, I gotta have a smoke with my coffee. She would, that's the trigger. The new behavior was to take out the photo album, flip it open, and stick $1 in it and shut it. The reward is that every time that she now could flip through the pages and see the amount of money she was saving and see how, she was conquering this, it just made her feel so good. So then after 3 or 4 days, literally, what was happening is she would be at dinner, and after dinner, the dinner smoke was the one that she loved the most. She would literally think about having the cigarette, and her mind would jump right to how cool the book felt.
So what do you do if it's an external force? So if it's, let's say, your boss or a work colleague or someone at your college who is just bringing on the stress, and so that then causes you to eat, but you can't get away from it because they're in your class or they're your boss and you have to go to work every day.
Right. I think what it's an excellent question because you can't always control who you have to be around.
Right, exactly.
I think long term, you need to get out of that situation. Because your body wisdom is telling you, based on the stress that you feel, that this is not the place you're supposed to be. And it's not your role in life to fix other people. It's actually to find the courage to figure out who you are and to align your life with that. And that, in many cases, means leaving situations, leaving relationships, leaving a career path. But in the meantime, what I would highly recommend, so I'm going to explain this 2 ways, or give you 2 tools to use. So I pay attention to an internal fuel gauge. Okay, we all imagine that you have a fuel tank inside of you. And it's either full, it's like somewhere in the range of empty to full, right? When you're empty, you feel depleted. When you're full, you feel energized. And so in the situation you're talking about, Lisa, there are people in your life or at work that actually deplete your energy.
Yeah.
That is a huge signal from your inner wisdom that this is something you have to change. And it doesn't mean fixing them. It means moving away from things that deplete you. And so my number 1 strategy for myself is, number 1, figure out ways where you can consciously move away from them, whether it's psychologically, whether it's physically. If you're in meetings, sit further away from them.
Okay.
If they are a boss, do less face-to-face stuff together. Be rehearsed about what you're talking about. The second thing is spend more time with the people at work that energize you, because that's naturally going to make you feel stronger. And then the second piece of advice is don't take the bait. This is one of the biggest lessons of my life. I only learned it recently. And my brother is the one that gave me this advice, and I love this advice. So one of my favorite people in the world is my mom.
Okay.
I absolutely admire, love, respect, incredible woman. And she's a big personality, just like me. And we have this thing where we don't live near each other, which I hate. And we see each other several times a year, and we're really, really good for like 3 or 4 days. And then we have one massive catastrophic blowout over something ridiculously stupid.
Okay.
And so we had one of those situations when I went to see her and my dad in Florida over spring break. And I called after the vacation. I called my brother, and he was like, "So how was vacation with Mom and Dad?" I said, "It was good. Mom and I got 4 days, and we had our screaming match at each other. And once that blew over, it was good again." And I said to him, "Why the hell don't you ever fight with Mom?" And he said, "Mel, it's very simple. I don't take the bait." And I was like, "What?" He said, "I don't take the bait." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "If she gets upset about something, it's her shit. It's not yours."
And is that what you found would happen? She'd get upset with you, and then that would kind of
and then I'd be like trying to fix it, and I'd take it
I
like.
see.
So there are people in your life, whether it's a boss or a partner or a business colleague, that are constantly like fishing emotionally with you. And what happens is, if you constantly find yourself entangled with people that leave you depleted, you're taking their bait.
We just said that. So my dad, he likes to defend himself and like say all these crazy things, and I've learned now to just let him keep going and then just move on.
Yes.
Like, I don't need to get in there and battle it because it's not going to change his mind anyway.
Yes.
That's what I've learned.
And he also may need to process all that stuff.
And so he cleans his own like thoughts by letting him just go. Because whenever I try to say something, he just defends himself even more.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And the other thing to realize is it's never about you.
Right.
It's not.
It's
Yeah.
never about you.
Yeah.
We are so self-absorbed that you think that every slight, that every comment, that every non-responded to text is personal.
Why do you think that is?
I actually think it's become magnified because of this. Everybody, this...
And for the podcast people, you're holding your phone.
I'm holding my
Yes.
phone. So when you think about your phone, the world has access to you, and you have a platform, because every time you're posting on your Facebook page, every time you're opening up your Instagram account, every time you're putting up a post, you now have a voice that's magnified. And as people like it or don't like it or this, and it's personal. And so I think this idea that it's all about you has become hyper magnified because of the way in which we use our phones. That when you get a text, it stimulates the addiction part of your brain. You get a dopamine hit, even though it's just a fucking notification from Zappos. You're literally like, whoa! Oh, somebody needs me! You know what I mean? That's the problem, is that our hard wiring has changed because every time this zzz, it makes your brain think that you're important. It makes your brain think that somebody needs you. And that is a fundamental need, to feel like you matter. And the problem is it's getting fulfilled by likes on Facebook and by notifications on your phone. That every time it buzzes, every time it beeps, it's hitting this fundamental need that, I matter, I'm important, I'm this and that. And so I think it's made us all have a really warped perspective. Like, one of the things that I want every woman to understand out there in particular is that, first of all, there is enough success in the world to go around, that you're not in competition with anybody. And that what's interesting about the internet and about cell phones and smartphones and social media is that we can get such tunnel vision, and we quantify our impact, our popularity, our success by the amount of followers you have or by the amount of likes that you have. And the truth is that there's just so many people out there that, first of all, aren't even paying attention to you.
Yeah.
Don't.
If they don't follow you, you literally do not exist to them.
Correct.
Yeah.
And even if they follow you, they may not be paying attention. And we hyper magnify everything that we're doing. because our phones have reminded us when people are paying attention. And so I think that it has a lot to do with technology, with social media. But the other thing is I recently, somebody texted me something that was like really snarky. And I had that rush of feelings where I wanted to run her over with a car. And I almost...
Nothing dramatic at all.
Yeah. And I wanted to pick up the phone. And I went 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to push that rage back down. Because I realized, first of all, I don't know what's going on with her world.
Right.
Secondly, and this gets back to the original point, if somebody attacks you, it's their shit. It's not you.
Don't take the bait.
Don't take the bait because, you know, one of the greatest lessons of being on CNN for so many years is that there are tons of trolls out there, but they only come after you if something that you've said hits them somewhere as the truth.
Oh, can I
Yes.
just talk about something? Okay, so I have to show you this quote that I posted that made me lose followers.
What?
And it was meant to be motivational. So let me just tell you how true what you're saying is. The quote says, "When you become lazy, it's disrespectful to those who believe in you." And so it's a different way of thinking about something to get your butt off the floor in case someone is looking up to you. And you cannot believe how many people were like, "Cassey, I am so disappointed in you. Like, why can't I have a lazy day? Da-da-da," and all this kind of stuff. It's like, okay, you actually do like need to take a step back and look at yourself because maybe this is true. Maybe you're having too many lazy days and you know that's why you're not doing what you need to do.
So here's what happened.
Yeah.
For everybody that like sounded off, the trigger is they think they're lazy.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's their shit.
Yes.
So that's why if somebody comes after you, even in this instance where this person wrote this really snarky thing, it wasn't even true. Again, it involved this friend of mine that's going through a divorce, and they accused me of spreading gossip about it,
Oh my gosh.
which wasn't true, and it really made me angry.
Yeah.
And what I came to find out, because I 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 pushed the rage down. Don't take the bait. This is her shit, not mine. 2 hours later, I get a kind of a very not generous apology.
Did you reply
Nope,
at all? Or you
didn't
literally
reply
went
at all.
quiet?
Did not reply at all. And I have since come to realize that she had been telling people. You know, so it was this, like, what was, yes. And so there's always something going on with the other person, and don't take the bait of thinking it's about you. And you will have so much more power when you operate like that. And it took me, 47 years to kind of figure that out. And the other thing that I do a lot is I take things off of text. So if I start getting emotional or something goes beyond, or because you get that sense that something's escalating,
Yes.
take it off of text.
Yeah.
Be the one that picks up the phone.
Yep.
It's not easy,
Yeah.
but be the one that picks up the phone. That makes all the difference in business. It makes all the difference with your personal life, with your family, everything. And so those are kind of two self-monitoring tools that I use all the time.
That's really good because so many things can get mistranslated through text. Like you forgot to put a period and all of a sudden it seems like something else, a different emoji, and it's all wrong. But when you see someone in person, you can see through their eyes what they're actually trying to say. Maybe they're not good with the writing, so it sounds totally different.
Yeah. Or,
Yeah.
like it's taken me about a year for the folks that work with me
Yeah.
to realize, and we're traveling, we're on a 10-day trip right now, and I've got a bunch of folks with me on this trip from the team, and we were riding in the car up here, and one of my team members, Robin, turns to me and said, "It's really great for me to be with you." And I said, "Great, why?" And she said, "I just realized for the first time in working with you for 8 months, you're not mad at me." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I would get these short texts while you're on the road, and I had no appreciation that you are being pulled in a million directions. You've jumped in a car. You've got 5 minutes in between." So again, the same thing.
Yep.
It's never about you.
Yeah.
Everybody is moving So everybody's got shit going on.
Yeah.
And so when you can start to develop this healthy distance from other people, and to also realize if anybody's ever disrespectful to you, upsetting, whatever, it's because there's some way in which you're behaving that is triggering something that's unresolved for them.
Right. I think that is so powerful.
Yeah. I'm going to try the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 because right now my technique is I write a text back, but I don't write it in the text. I'll write it in like a notes pad or something just to get it off my chest.
Oh.
And then I don't send it. I just delete it. But
So it's like journaling for you, a
it's
diary.
kind of like journaling, like the response
That's a
I
good
want,
technique too.
and then
I
I
like that.
write it. But then at the end, because I've let it all out, I've let out the emotion, I am then able to reflect and understand that it's not about me, it's
Right.
about them.
Right.
But I have to write that thing first. So I think
Well, you know
most
what you're
of just
doing,
say
Lisa?
to
I
me,
call this hyperprocessing. So there's a lot of time where I'll have to vomit out
right.
the upset.
Yeah.
And I'll say to somebody, I just need to hyperprocess this really good. I'm really fucking pissed off. And I'm doing a lot with this right now because our first daughter's gone off to school and she's not exactly thrilled with the college experience.
Okay.
It's way more boring and constrained than she thought it was going to be for the particular school. She picked a school that was a little bit too academic.
Okay.
And I think wanted a little bit more balance socially. And so I'm getting triggered because I grew up with a mom that I was constantly worried was disappointed.
Okay.
And so every time I get a Snapchat from her or this, and she looks bored or she's this, I'm triggered. And so
So
I'll
I have to fix it.
Yes,
Okay.
but I'm catching myself. So I'll go to Chris. I think she needs. I just need to hyperprocess
Yeah.
this. I think she needs to transfer it. I'm really upset that she's sad. And and I'm like, okay, I'm okay. Now I'm not going to text her back.
You know what I mean? Right? It's like that release valve
Yes.
of like a pressure cooker. And you're
Yes.
just like, shh.
See, you're right, Lisa, and I love the shh because there are some people that can breathe it out. But for a lot of us, particularly if you suffer from anxiety, and there's one more thing I want to say about anxiety to kind of round out the conversation, but anxiety is a state of high energy, okay? It is very difficult to breathe yourself out of it because your heart is racing. And the other thing about anxiety is that the body state, when you're anxious, the sweaty palms, the tight throat, the heart racing, the pit in the stomach, that's the exact same body state of being excited. Right before a race, that's how you feel. Right before a speech, that's how you feel. Right before a rock concert, that's how you feel. And so a really simple strategy is that hyperprocessing because it's super fast and it gives your mind the ability to get it out really quickly and then there's nothing else and you're immediately calm. Versus trying to slow yourself down with breathing when everything's like this already. So another technique you can use is if you've got to do something for the first time and you've got performance anxiety, just say, I'm really excited to take this test. I'm really excited to give this speech. I'm really excited to run this race. I'm really excited to go to my first spin class. I'm really excited to try juicing for the first time. This is research out of the Harvard Medical School that was just published 5 months ago. It's a strategy called reframing performance anxiety.
Interesting.
And by giving your brain, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. Remember, we talked about worrying is the little sister, anxiety is the big sister, panic attack is the mother of all worry.
Okay.
When you start to say, I'm excited, you give your brain an explanation for why your body state is agitated.
But you give it a positive
Correct.
And then
state
you're
than a
ready for
negative.
So then your mind doesn't hijack
genius.
you. And what they found in studies at Harvard Medical School is that by saying I'm excited and giving your body state context, your mind does not fill with cortisol and it doesn't hijack your performance.
How interesting.
And so in study after study, people perform better on tests, they perform better at track meets, they perform better in anything they're about to do because without the cortisol in the brain, because you've cut it off by saying I'm excited, you're able to focus.
Wow.
And so now take this to panic attacks. If you're having a panic attack or you've got situations where you have them, flying, talking to your boss, dating, like whatever it may be, going to a gym for the first time, what you need to do is come up with a thought that makes you excited about the thing that you're going to do. So maybe it's like think about the way that you will feel or some outfit you're going to put on after you've been exercising for 6 months. And when you start to get that anxiety state happening because you have a habit of beating yourself up because you're not in good shape or whatever, you don't like your body, Just start going, I'm so excited to put on that outfit. I'm so excited to put on that outfit. Or I'm so excited to feel good about myself. Or I'm so excited. And you give your mind that context that's positive.
Yeah.
So that the anxiety state doesn't blow into panic. That strategy works with flying. Think about where you're going. In fact, on the way here, our Lyft driver said, "Are you Mel Robbins?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I listened to your audiobook and I now am able to get on a plane." And I said, "Well, what do you what's your anchor thought before you get on?" He said, "Well, when I start feeling panicky on a plane, I start thinking about hugging my kids when I get off the plane and then say I'm excited to go to the beach with them or wherever it is that we're going." And so he said it's weird how simple these things are and how powerful they are. Now, the one thing I want to say about anxiety is I read an article, and we'll give you guys the link on Quartz, about a big study. There are a lot of us women that suffer from anxiety. They call us the lost generation because they're now realizing that there were a huge number of women that actually had a primary issue of ADD when they were girls. And ADD and ADHD in girls manifests very differently than it does in boys. When you're a girl with ADD and ADHD, it's not like the hyper and like super physical distraction, it's mental distraction. So feeling like you can't get your work done, feeling like you're not organized, feeling like you don't understand instructions. And then it starts to build into this sense that you're not good enough or that you're not capable. And then the anxiety comes. But so there's a whole group of women, particularly my age, in their 40s, that were diagnosed in our 20s as having anxiety when really it was undiagnosed ADD that caused the whole fricking train wreck.
Wow.
And so I say that because when I read this article, I went back to my doctor and said, I just read this article about ADD and, I'm wondering, is that something that maybe I have? And he's like, girl, you are textbook. Like, has nobody ever told you? And I said, well, why the hell didn't you tell me? Like, what do I? And he said, I just assumed you knew. And it wasn't bothering you. And so that has been so incredible to have the kind of compassion for myself to understand that I'm not necessarily rude or not smart or not able to be productive. It's that there's a part of me in terms of the way that my mind works that gets super distracted. And so, one of the things that I think is so important is for all of us to embrace who we are and who we're not. And instead of trying to fix yourself, try to understand yourself and have a little bit more empathy and compassion and self-love and work with what you've got instead of bashing what you've got.
Wow.
How do we use that then for kids now? Like, if we've discovered this and it's become enlightening, how do we use that then for, let's say, the Mel Robbins that was 16, 17, 18, that was having these anxiety attacks?
Well, I just think that it's something that, particularly if you've got kids and you're like, interesting. Like, I've noticed my daughter's pulled back a little bit. And my daughter seems a little worried these days. She seems like worked up about school. She might be worked up at school not because she's anxious. She might be worked up because she's actually having trouble focusing. And so explore this as a possibility. That's all. It doesn't mean that she is or she isn't, but explore this as a potential possibility that this is what's causing low self-esteem, a little bit of depression, feeling like you're not good enough, that your mind doesn't have the executive functioning and the focus skills, and that there are things and strategies that you can do to actually support her in that cognitive issue versus it becoming an issue about self-worth.
Wow. Mel, I feel like you've blown our minds 5,000 times during this episode. I hope everyone watching really
I want to make this into like a 3-hour episode. Like, questions I just want to keep throwing out.
But Mel has places to go. And so before we do let you go, can you let everyone know where they can find you, any programs you have coming up?
Sure. So 99% of what I do is free, just like you. Like I have made so many mistakes in my life that if I can save any of you heartbreak and headache, learn from my mistakes. I don't consider myself an expert. I think that I am really curious and I love simple solutions and I love understanding human behavior. And so I'm sharing what I'm learning so you can think about ways in which you can tweak your own behavior and thinking patterns so you can live your own best life, whatever the hell that means for you. But, you can go to melrobbins.com. We've got a weekly newsletter that 250,000 people read every week. We have big YouTube channel. We've got social media following. But one of the things that I'm really proud of is that twice a year we launch a course called The Power of You. And it is a course about the science of clarity. So if you have trouble making decisions, that's all about clarity. And I teach you the science of inner wisdom and how to manipulate your body state and your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. We talk about the skill of confidence, the science behind courage. And so it's a really, really rich, cool course. But the thing that's cool about it is it comes with a 4-week daily coaching program with me where you pick a project. And it could be, I just want to stop hating myself. Or it's, I really want to finish this book I've always wanted to write. Or it's, I want to get this business off the ground. You can pick anything. And every day for 4 weeks, you're part of a Facebook group that we curate that we all have daily assignments and everybody uploads videos. And our last class had 1,700 people around the world in it. And it's called The Power of You. And our next class, the fall class of 2017, is starting September 20th. Go to melrobbins.com/powerofyou and you can read about upcoming courses. But this has been the single most rewarding thing I've ever done professionally.
Wow, and I'm sure they'll learn so much out of that.
Yeah.
And for everyone listening, let's give the listeners one final superpower that you think everyone can activate right now to find their Shero within.
So we've talked about don't take the bait.
Right.
And we've talked about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes, we did.
This is going to sound so stupid.
No, every time you think something stupid, it's like the next big thing. It's your next book. So just say it.
Yeah, you said that about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah.
That's true. Be a fan. And what does that mean? So we underestimate the power of cheering for other people. Whether it is complimenting your Lyft driver or smiling at the security guard and saying hello or cheering for somebody that is starting something on social media. The smallest smile, the act of cheering and encouraging and being a fan of other people will enrich your life and will make you feel so much more connected to other people and give you so much wealth, both spiritual, personal, and even bank account wealth that you cannot even imagine. That is at the heart of being a good and successful human, because every one of us wants to know that we matter. Every one of us wants to be seen. And every human being has got a load of shit on their plate. And so if you can be the bright spot in somebody's day by simply saying hello, it is unbelievable how that will come back to you if that becomes a habit.
I love that
love that
so
too.
much. And be a genuine fan because
Yeah.
people can tell.
Yeah.
Oh, Mel, thank you so much.
God.
Really.
Oh
That
my
was,
God.
I gotta give this round of applause. It was amazing. You guys, if you like this episode, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube. Give us a rate and review on iTunes.
And until next time, guys, be Sheroic!